Good evening, everyone. Dear Arantxa, dear friends, dear students, it's really a privilege to be here this evening with you for the Youth and Leaders Summit. If I am not mistaken, it's the 10th anniversary of this event, and year after year, it shows how attractive PSIA is. Here, a school that we are so proud to have in Sciences Po. It brings together talented students from all over the world, and it's always energizing to see the strong interest that our students have for geopolitical issues. I have a little secret to share, which is that we were with Arantxa in Davos last week, and I have to say that of course, it was a tumultuous week. Everyone has been following that in the news. But what gave me some hope for this institution and for you, dear students, is that if you look at the main issues that were at the center of the debate, they were geopolitics and, of course, the increasing conflictuality on the world stage, AI and climate. And I'm really proud to say that these are three issues that we have put at the core of what we do here in Sciences Po. I'm really absolutely persuaded that we are indeed training a generation of future leaders. And I really, in fact, put lots of hope on what you guys will be doing. I see a generation that is coming up that is both very mindful of the challenges that it will have to overcome, and at the same time not depressed or despaired by these challenges, but in fact extremely enthusiastic. In today's world, to face the major challenges of the present and the future, understanding global dynamics, the position of different actors and their interests is no longer an option. It's an absolute necessity to understand what practitioners and current leaders have been doing, and I'm really glad that we host here this dialogue between the youth and leaders. This is even more true, of course, in the international context. It's true of all issues that we cover here that range from journalism to public governance, but of course, when it comes to international relations, I make the case, as a former diplomat, that practice and the dialogue between practice and theory are indeed extremely important. Having a global, connected, and clear-minded approach and resisting the temptation to think in isolated terms, think globally, think as a structure, think in systems is indeed what defines Sciences Po in general and PSIA in particular, and I'm sure that's what you'll be doing here. Whatever position you hold in the future, I think that's where you'll be able to make the difference, making sure that you connect different issues together rather than remaining on your specific silo. Here at Sciences Po, what you do is, of course, welcome and nurture that diversity. So it's true from on the substance. As you know, we are very much focused on interdisciplinarity in what we do. But it's also true when it comes to the diversity of the students we welcome here. If there is one place in the world that is truly global, it is, I think, Sciences Po. I have one figure that I like. There are two figures that I like to share with the public, so we will do it tonight again, which is that we have between 40 and 50% of international students here in Sciences Po, and we are extremely proud of it. First of all, I truly believe that it would make no sense to train future French leaders in a non-international context, but I also think that international students benefit from their presence here in Sciences Po. But there is another metric that I follow very tightly, which is that there is no nationality other than French, obviously, that represents more than 6% of the student body. And that means that we are indeed a very global platform, not oriented towards one area in the world, but really open to all. I will not be longer, but I think I just wanted to share these few words and remarks and tell you how we appreciate your presence here, leaders and the youth, and tell you that indeed Sciences Po is the place to be these days. Tomorrow, as you know, we'll have a major event with the presence of the Prime Minister of Denmark and Greenland, who will address the world from this very place. And I think it says a lot about the impact that Sciences Po has globally. And that happens thanks, obviously, to the teacher, researchers that we have here, to the academic and administrative staff. But obviously, it happens also because we are able to gather here leaders from all around the world, but also the best and brightest students. And so thank you very much for being here with us, and have a great Youth and Leaders Summit.
All right, thank you very much, Luis. Thank you for your kind words. Welcome everyone to this new edition of the Youth and Leaders Summit, where aspiring leaders meet with seasoned leaders. This theme of leadership is very important, especially in those very troubled times we are living. It's troubled times, but at the same time incredibly interesting, because in a way you don't have that often the possibility to write history, to write your own future. And this is what leadership is about. The theme of this year is we wanted to be a bit provocative. Wanted UN Secretary General for a broken world. Now, 2026 will see the election of a new Secretary General for the United Nations. Of course, there is also another election taking place in 2026 that would in a way be important, is the midterm election in the United States. But we know that the the one concerning the UN Secretary General will receive less attention. So we wanted to focus a little bit on that. In a way, it will be consequential because it will give us a sense of the appetite for international cooperation by countries around the world. It will test the desire of members of the United Nations to try a different type of leadership. Something that perhaps has not been tested before. Secretary Generals have come from Europe, from Asia, from Latin America, from Africa. We've had more conservative UN Secretary Generals and more progressive UN Secretary Generals. We've had diplomats, economists, educators, lawyers, mediators. We've had younger Secretary Generals and more seasoned ones. We've tried Nobel Prize winners, champions of climate change, flag bearers for humanitarian affairs, or those focused on governance of artificial intelligence. The only thing that we haven't tried and tested yet is a woman Secretary General. So maybe the election at the end of the year will give us a sense of the appetite, the real appetite, to try and test a different type of leadership. This is leadership, what we need in those troubled times. Leadership means lucidity to read the situation. And if we read the situation, we see a lot of fragmentation, a lot of fracture. We see a fracture in a universal rules-based order. We say those words a lot. And for many, this order wasn't really that orderly. They were living in conflict. They were living in violations of human rights. They were suffering aggression or invasions. So when others said order, they didn't really feel that closely to that order. Many thought that they were not there when this order was being built and did not have a lot of ownership. But I think everybody felt that there was a roof under which they all belonged. And right now, this roof is crumbling, and countries are having to make choices, and leaders are having to decide where to go. Where to choose subordination, try to find another roof under which to sit, even if the rules of the house that built that roof are difficult to accept, or choose cooperation, choose building a new home with some rules of engagement where they all feel they belong. Both are there on display. Luis mentioned Davos. Both were very clear on display in Davos. There was a board of peace with some rules of engagement, a home that one built with clear rules of engagement under the leadership of that one builder of the road, of the house, and there were others on display. There was a coalition to end child and maternal health. There was an EU-Mercosur deal. Today there is a new one, an EU-India partnership. Leadership will be essential to decide which way to go. The second fracture is the fracture in the transatlantic alliance. We will hear a lot about that tomorrow morning. Because when one member of the alliance questions sovereignty, is this an alliance? It's obliged the European Union to rethink its strategy. It has obliged the US, especially the US president, to face up to the fact that the American economy is extremely interdependent from the European economy. Interdependence is the name of our relationship. The third fracture is a fracture in internal stability. In the US, we are seeing this with a weakening of the internal checks and balances, with a very polarized society, but we are seeing this across the world with Gen Z in many countries demanding less corruption, better governance, and better economic opportunities, from Nepal to Peru, from Kenya to Madagascar, from Indonesia to Morocco, or Serbia. This fracture is also there and requires leadership. Final fracture is the climate and technology fracture that hold an incredible promise if we find leadership to work together, but can also aggravate existing inequalities. So leadership is lucidity to analyze these fractures. Leadership is also responsibility. It's also empowerment, which is what we will try to unpack in those 2 days, and of course, over the remainder of the semester. What we have tried to put in the program for you, this is your program, is a set of questions that leaders will have to deal with. First is how to be activistic in shaping this world that is more troubled. How to invest in building deterrence, in defense and security, while ensuring that we invest in social safety nets, in climate adaptation, or in building the necessary technology infrastructure. We want to look at artificial intelligence that is, in a way, captured between a hype and a doom. Where is the truth? We're going to try and get that right. Finally, we will also hear from many different parts of the world about the perspectives on international cooperation. You will also have opportunities to aspiring leaders. We'll have the opportunity to talk to seasoned leaders. Use those small conversations behind closed doors to get the recipe to the success, but also to understand how you manage failure, because this is what leaders face. They face very often collapse. More than often, they also face difficulties, failures that they have to deal with. Ask them how they did that. This is the beginning of the semester. We wanted to start big. We wanted to start with a bang, but this is not the end. During the semester, we have many surprises in our box, surprises that we will be unpacking over the next weeks, with this motto that we started the year with, of leaving no stone unturned. This is the challenge, and with this challenge, let the 11th edition of the Youth Aspiring Leaders and Seasoned Leaders begin. Thank you very much. The floor is now to you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here on the first session of the Youth and Leader Summit 2026. My name is Rina Gillespie, and I am a second-year master's student in international security here at PSIA Sciences Po, and I am delighted to be here with you this evening to introduce and moderate the inaugural session of the summit. Before we begin, I would like to thank again Dean Gonzalez and President Fassi for their opening words, but of course mainly to thank them for their continued support in creating this space. A space for dialogue between, like we said, our aspiring leaders, our talented youth, and the world-class leaders that we're lucky to be joined by today. Now, tonight's session is framed around a question, and one that feels especially urgent, but it is by no means new, and that is how to be an activist in turbulent times. Now, in many ways, activism presupposes turbulence, perhaps not turbulence experienced equally by all, but turbulence that is deeply felt by some and deeply enough to compel people to stand up, to resist, and to act. And throughout history, much of our social and political change has emerged not from moments of comfort, but exactly from these moments of disruption and discomfort. Yet what we also mean by activism can vary dramatically. For some, it may be peaceful protest, it's knocking on doors, it's boycotting institutions, meeting with representatives, or working to reshape systems from within. And for others, activism has taken on a more confrontational and even destructive form. And these differences raise many difficult questions about legitimacy, effectiveness, and most importantly, I think tonight, which we'll reach on to, is the risks sometimes associated with activism in its many forms. And now, as we all very much unfortunately understand, as societies across the globe become increasingly polarized and militarized, as the dynamics of our civic spaces change and activism is in some places criminalized and literally shut down, what role can activism have in our societies today? Can it have this role in societies today? Or, what we hope, how will it evolve in order to sustain its important impact? And so these are just a few questions that I hope we're going to touch upon this evening, and I'm very pleased to be joined by two speakers whose careers and experience will give real weight to this discussion. Namely Kate Gilmore, chairperson here of the International Planned Parenthood Federation and former Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights at the United Nations from 2015 to 2019, and Ndidi Okonkwo-Nveneli, President and CEO of the One Campaign. Please give them a very warm welcome to Sciences Po.
All right, so we have quite a lot that we can talk about this evening. When we were speaking beforehand, you have to wonder where can you even start with this. But I think it would be remiss of us to not utilize the experience we have with us here on stage and the fact that you guys are both working within two major institutions and have done before in your previous careers. So when we think of activism as students, sometimes we think it is just those of us outside these institutions fighting almost against them. But maybe indeed we could begin by speaking of your experience of activism through institutions, empowered by institutions and from within.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's really an honor and privilege to be here, and thank you, Professor Arancha and the team. So the One Campaign is a global advocacy organization, and the ethos of the One Campaign is rooted in our belief in values: human dignity, equity, and justice. It was started by young people, and it has been propelled by young people. Over the last 22 years, we fought for the investments to ensure healthier lives and economic opportunity, and our vision is that Africa is an equal player. How do we do this? Hard-hitting data, Data is part of activism. You might not realize it, but in a world where we have alternative truths today, the concept of pre-bunking is part of the data. And the work you do here, especially around research, real research, telling what the truth is part of that. The second is what we call at one insider-outsider game. You've seen former politicians come here and teach you, right? But forming those relationships built on trust allows you to influence what they do. And in some cases, you're allowed. In other cases, you go through insiders to make change happen. The third is youth voices. And youth are such an important part of our history. We have worked with young people as activists, as champions, on many, many issues, from fighting for HIV/AIDS medicines and life-saving medicines through Global Fund and Gavi, to fighting for Africa to have a seat at the G20. And that was a success, because for the first time, South Africa hosted the G20 last year. And then we also work with faith leaders, because in some places you can't go in, but faith leaders can. Celebrity voices, and we all love celebrities in many, many societies. In some societies, they hate celebrities, but you work with them where you can. And then finally, it's really around saying, where do I stand on issues and what am I willing to fight for? Leveraging all these toolkits. In some cases, what we found is that if you don't build trust and you yourself are not authentic internally and agree on what side of the world you're going to fight with and what issues you're going to stand by, you don't come off as being someone who can make a change. So authenticity and values are the bedrock of the toolkits that you use. And one has proven that it still works, even as hard as it is today. Because on the issues that really matter, where it matters, with the right people, we call them the coalition of the willing, we can move the needle on issues that matter the most to us. And this is a time to show courage and wisdom more than ever before. And so I'm so excited that this room is full of young people, because the future is yours today.
No, thank you, Ndidi. I think it's a nice positive note to start off with, and I don't want this conversation to turn into a pessimistic one. Now, I know a lot of us can feel pessimistic when activism, it feels like sometimes is pushing against a brick wall that does not want to move. But we've seen here one example, the one campaign, the one group, you're pushing to have an institution have an activist role. It's not just an individual, it's a group empowering. But maybe I could bring you in here, Kate, to talk about the fact that a lot of these institutions, now not necessarily yours, we've heard great work from it, but the title of an institution and the concept of an institution is one that many people are losing faith in. And so when you are working from within an institution, whether it's formerly when you were in the UN, whether it's now, how do you manage that lack of trust coming from the outside and enable the credibility to live on? How do you make sure your activism can actually reach across that barrier, even if it's not the work you're doing that is degenerating that trust? You know, it's a generalized feeling sometimes we're having that these institutions as a label are not something that we can trust anymore.
Well,
it's not an easy one.
Let me start by thanking you for the great privilege of being here and having this conversation, particularly with Ndidi and the One Campaign. It's a true honour. I want to just peel back to the core question in a way in order to get to institutional trust and say to you the choice is not between activism and not activism. You are active. You are goal-oriented. You will find yourself working to create value through values for some purpose. The question isn't whether you're an activist. The question is, what are you active for? Within which guardrails are you prepared to be bought through salary, through wage, through career promotion? That's the question you have to come to. For in whose interests are you working? No one is asking you to stay outside career paths. No one's saying to you there is no activism within organisations. You have as much space to be activist for better outcomes for more people as you have power. Do you have the power to open and close a door? Do you have the power to speak or be silent? Do you have the power to notice, to call out oppression when you see it. You have the choice. It is a choice people are exercising. From prison cells to boardrooms, from slums to favelas, from classrooms to medical wards. It isn't a question of whether or not you can do activism wherever you are. It is a question of what are you prepared to do in order to be active for what? In every single situation where you are safe, where you are not being subjected to torture, when you are not scrambling for shelter or for food or for protection, as every Palestinian in Gaza is today, in every situation that is not like that, you have the opportunity, I would say the responsibility, to check your activism. And for what are you active? According to which values and in whose interests?
Thank you. I think that actually speaks very well to the next question I was going to ask you, and maybe it'll now turn into a bit of a commentary on what you said, that many of us in this room are looking to head into, like Arantxa said, careers where we can become these future leaders. We want to have careers in, whether it's IR, environment, in development, but when we are faced with, at times, repressive regimes in certain places in the world, when you have undemocratic practices happening within administrations, within the judiciary, within the police force, that how, let's say in the example of students, would you advise them to balance the potential need in their head or potential question that I need to dilute my activism in order to secure the career where maybe I can perform more activism? Or how do I choose, to what extent do I hold back that activism to ensure that I can take the next step to have a lengthy career where I can have that impact? It's something I think a lot of us are battling with, especially in the last few years, with the types of things that we are trying to push through to administrations, to push through to our governments. But we're also humans, and we also have needs and wants, and we want to be able to have careers. So I want to maybe open this up to both of you. Maybe indeed, if you want to start.
Thank you. An excellent question. I would say two things. I would say all of us need to have a moral compass. I think very early on as a young person, I started off at McKinsey & Company. Like many of you, went to the undergrad and business school, but I had to decide what my moral compass was and what I would be comfortable doing every single day, and what I want to go to bed thinking about the impact I've made. And for me, your opportunity to develop that moral compass is now, when you're still young. Where do you stand on integrity? Where do you stand on human rights? Where do you stand on human dignity? Who is your neighbor? Is somebody who is next door to you your neighbor, or someone in another country? How far removed is suffering from you? What does it really matter if someone is mistreated? And I think understanding who you are early allows you to climb up. Because if you don't, when success comes, when power comes, when money comes, you get lost. And that's what I see with so many young people. There's a quote that I remember. My mother happens to be Jewish. So I'm Jewish, Igbo, if you can believe it. And there's a quote from the Nazi period that said, they came for the socialists. I was not socialist, so I did not speak up. How many of you have heard of that quote? I use it in Nigeria all the time. They came for the Muslims. I was not Muslim, so I did not speak up. They came for the Christians. I was not Christian. They came for the women. I was not a woman, so I did not speak up. And when they came for me, there was no one left to speak on my behalf. And that is the current state of affairs today. You distance yourself from a problem, assuming it will never come to your doorstep. The news is that it will. So you have to stand for something, know your values. The second is, know your appetite for courage and wisdom. Courage and wisdom. Recently, I sat in a conference in South Africa, and I heard an individual say that out of school, he worked in a government office for a UK Prime Minister. At that time, we had taken on the Drop the Debt campaign, trying to get $110 billion forgiven in debt from countries, including France, debts that was unfair debts that African countries had taken. We wanted it forgiven. It was called Drop the Debt. Guess what happened? He was in the Prime Minister's office and they got a bag of postcards that students like yourself had written. But in one of those postcards, the Prime Minister's secretary, and some of you will be in those offices, saw the postcard and put it in front of the Prime Minister, said, "You have to read this one." Guess who wrote the postcard? His mother. His mother said, "Drop the debt." Guess who got his mother to write that postcard? One of the students who went to his house, his mother's house, and stood there for hours until the mother wrote the postcard. And that postcard he looked at. So you choose whether you want to be the student asking the mother to write the postcard, the assistant, the staffer who says, "Prime Minister, you must look at this postcard. You know the person who wrote it." Or the Prime Minister himself who decides, "I'm going to make a difference and I'm going to fight alongside many African leaders to get $110 billion forgiven." It took 5 years. It was tough, but the debt was forgiven. You decide where on that spectrum you need and are ready to be, but do not stand on the sidelines. Get involved, take a stand on something because it matters today and it matters in future. And generations will hold us accountable for the choices we take today.
Kate, just to link onto that again, I think you've maybe seen my questions. This is very much linking on again to what I was going to say about this moral clarity, political effectiveness, push-pull that activists can feel, and especially at this stage of activism that many of us are at, that how do you adapt your strategy to an administration or a government to ensure it has impact without implicitly endorsing that administration or government? What I mean by that is when you are adapting to make sure that your impact is still being had, that your impact is still being sustained, no matter the walls being put up against you, the repression that you're experiencing, but how far do you go before you start to accept the way the administration is treating you in order just to have some sort of impact? Is it still worth it at that point?
I don't think there's an absolute answer to it. There's just a wealth of history of people who found the red line over which they refused to be drawn, even at peril to their own lives, even at risk of imprisonment, even at cost of expulsion. And they, historically, have been the greatest of change makers. What's extraordinary is in the history of emancipatory movements is that they've always had at the forefront young people. In every one of the decolonising movements, it was the young who called it out, who populated the struggle and who paid the price. In the Arab Spring, it was students across the Arab world who stood up and took the risk of resisting tyranny and calling it out. In Indonesia, in the Philippines, in Myanmar, on the streets of Iran today, it is people with the least power who are taking the action. How's that? The question isn't whether you have courage to use your power. It's to notice the courage of those who have the least and who have gifted us the greatest ideas, the greatest manifestations of freedom, liberty, equality, justice, remedy, reparation. It is they who give us the example that you should follow, and you can follow with confidence and with surety. But be warned, there's no fence to sit on unless you like splinters in uncomfortable places. If you are not in the struggle against the status quo of this unconscionably unjust, unequal and unsustainable world, you inevitably are working for its continuation. I repeat, it's not a question of whether you're inside the state or outside the state, whether you're in meta and big, resourceful, resource-rich organisations or small ones. It's a question of in whose interest you make decisions daily. Daily. It's not about big gesture politics, although at times it's called for. It's not about risk to life and limb. Come on, that's not true. That's not true. That's not what most of you will face. It will be far more mundane. It will be whether you notice the sexism, the racism in the workplace and are prepared to call it out. It is whether you are willing to join in community organising to resist the sorts of horrors we're seeing on the streets of Minneapolis today. It is whether you're prepared to march for calling out the fossil fuel industries. They are not life and limb choices. They're everyday choices available to all of us. I hope you are never, and some of you come from places where many, many, many people have had to make life and limb choices, and inshallah that is not going to be your destiny. But don't imagine that courage is about being only in life and limb threatening situations. It is found in the strength to know what you stand for, to stand up for what you stand for, and to speak out. That is a daily business, quotidian, without end, until such time as it's quite clear that each and every one of us has equal access to the human rights that are our heritage and our birth entitlement. That is a collective responsibility that invokes all of us. And if you're not part of it, you're against it. It's as simple as that.
Thank you so much, Kate. I don't know how many quotes our journalists are going to have to take out of this one. Good luck, because we need this encouragement more than ever, I think, as students. You have said we have the luck, in a strangely twisted way, of having the examples of so many students that have risen up before for so many different types of injustices, and even beyond students. Even today, like you mentioned, in Minneapolis, we're seeing on our phones and our screens and our radios everywhere, protest is around us. Now, protest is not the only form of activism. We've mentioned that already. There are so many other ways, whether they be big actions, the mundane, the in-between, but protest is usually the most visible. But unfortunately, due to discrimination and profiling, it's also usually one of the most exclusionary. And given your work with the One Campaign in DD, could you maybe speak to, on a practical sense, given the question we have today of how to be an activist in turbulent times, what other forms of activism can people reach into?
Thank you so much. I'm fortunate to be joined here by members of our One Campaign team in France. And they've done some phenomenal work here in Paris, but also across Europe, in partnership with each other. I think there's value in choosing to be an activist with others. Because number one, you don't feel alone. Number two, you actually draw strength from each other. And how do they show up? I've mentioned writing to their parliamentarians, writing to their district leaders, all the way up. Getting involved in shaping the standard of what an election should look like, the values that we should be voting in, what a budget should be constituted of, writing research papers that shaped SDG, influencing the taxes and their tax allocation to development, because it pays more to invest in development than defense. And that's one of the arguments we have taken at the One Campaign. We had our young people at Munich Security Conference handing out bills. $103 is how much you spend in defense if you don't spend $1 in development. With those stunts, it actually makes people think, right? It makes people, it questions them. We lead stunts during concerts, we lead stunts during matches. We find ways to get everybody aware and involved, to care. And so I would suggest think about joining as a group, and some of you have already done that. Interestingly, when I joined One Campaign over 2 years ago, I was carrying around a bag. And people would stop me on the street and say, I was involved when I was a student, and it built my muscle. So start small. Build your muscle, get comfortable with information and being an individual who believes in something. And sometimes you have to educate yourself and get out of your comfort zone. We've had our young people go to the Gavi and Global Fund replenishment meetings and meet Macron face to face in some of these meetings and challenge his stance. Challenge France's stance on different issues when it comes to fighting for healthier lives. Or celebrate when France shows up and does the right thing. So it's not always, activists are not always critical. They also provide political cover for those in politics who demonstrate courage and wisdom. And we need more of that, because unfortunately, as more people step away from global solidarity, those who choose to stand up for global solidarity need to be celebrated. Some of us were very excited by Carney's speech at Davos. I don't know if any of you have listened, but please do listen and discuss it in your classes. We provide some political support and cover. We even help write speeches. And many of our activists write speeches that then get into newspapers and get on stages. So there are many ways to get involved, and I suggest you determine today to take a stand on something and find others who share your values, but make sure you're open to learning. Make sure you're open to being challenged. We never want to be on the side of history that we get so stuck in our ways that we're not willing to keep learning, keep growing, and keep challenging ourselves. And that would be my advice to you. Please do join up. And it doesn't have to be one, but there are many, many great causes. Bono was an activist, but first he was a musician who had values. It took a young person called Jamie Drummond to call him for 2 years, once a week for 2 years, before he decided to use his celebrity platform for a great cause. And today, Jamie Drummond, Bono, and Bobby Shriver started the One campaign, and I happen to be standing on their shoulders. So sometimes you don't have to be the one that starts it. Join someone else who has a vision bigger than yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Like I said at the beginning, we could go for an hour, an hour and a half, but we do have many faces in front of us and many great minds in front of us that want to ask us some questions. So now we are moving to the Q&A session of the evening. I will preface this before you do head to the microphones that we have exactly 19 minutes for your questions. So please have a think over the next 30 seconds, get your questions into a one-liner, and we'll get some brief comments then from our panel up on stage. So we've got one microphone here on my left, one on my right. If you make an orderly line behind, state your name, your program if you'd like, where you're from, and then your one-line question as well.
Good evening. My name is Julie Kobik, and I'm a master's student in international security. I have a question relating to what you said, Ndidi, about getting overwhelmed sometimes, and having a good moral compass. And my question is, when we have a very strong moral compass and have a lot of issues that we care about, how can we choose what to fight for and prioritize when there are so many things that are worth fighting for? Thank you.
Dee, do you want to take that one first?
Just really quickly, I would say make a list of those things and rank them by what gives you energy, what makes you angry, and what gives you joy. If you can find one that makes you angry enough, gives you energy, and then when you deliver short, small wins, gives you joy, that would be number one. But rank them. I had to do the same thing. I'm so proud of you. I know you find the one thing to start with, and you don't have to end there. Take one thing, when you move the needle on it, you can take on the next one.
Kate, do you want to jump in there as well?
Just remember, you're not alone. Most people, public polling confirms, across the world, want a more just, a more fair, a more equal world. You're not alone. Reach out. Extend the hand. Lower the fist. Make sure that you walk arm in arm. And in that spirit of joy and anger and opportunity as a fantastic formula, you won't go wrong. You can't go wrong. You know, the Harvard University research confirms that that non-violent social movements are far more successful at sustained progressive change than is any other form of change movement. Stockholm University confirms not only is it more successful at sustained, it's the swiftest path to change. And generation after generation of young people have demonstrated exactly that through non-violent public protest, campaigning and sheer rat cunning. You're smart. You are a great asset to social change. Get your theory of change clear in your mind. Organise together and nothing will stop you. Sojourner Truth, I believe, who was an activist against enslavement, said, yeah, I might be powerless and I might be small, but have you ever spent a night in a tent with a flea? Be the flea, people. Be the flea.
All right, we have another question up on this side. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hillary. I'm a Canadian second-year student in the Human Rights and Humanitarian Action program. And I'm really grateful for your words today and your contribution about how to be an activist, while at the same time left with a feeling of irony, knowing that some of my peers, even in this very room, have been repressed by the university's administration for advocating for what they believe in. And so my question is, for those of us who are feeling disillusioned or who are feeling frustrated and like there's no way to make a change, what advice can you give to help us get through that and move forward in changing the institutions we care so deeply about? Thank you.
I can briefly say I don't know the situation in the school, but when I've had a challenge within my institution, I've had to look outside the institution for support. And you have a lot of people outside institutions that will lend their voice. You have alumni, you have funders, you have faith leaders, you have celebrity voices. So don't limit yourself to the environment where you sit. Realize your voice is bigger and stronger and that you have allies everywhere. And like he said, you can leverage on those allies, especially during the darkest moments. That's what we're doing today. I happen to sit in Washington, D.C. It's easy to get disillusioned. But because we have supporters globally, because I have offices in 9 countries, I see hope. And I surround myself with hope. And that's what keeps me going every single day.
And I would just offer that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Go easy on yourselves. Pick your battles. Never stop the struggle. But do your SWOT analysis. What are your resources and your strengths and opportunities? What are theirs? And that's why sometimes rat cunning and delaying the gratification of success until the odds are on your side is a far wiser approach. It's okay to get a degree, cool. It's okay not to piss off the administration here. That may be tactically very wise, but just don't let that become the goal. Let that be the means and keep your ends clearly in sight.
Thank you for that question. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to head over to this side again. Remember, state your name, program, and then your one-line question.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Precious Paul, and I happen to be Nigerian as well. I'm half Igbo as well. And I'm a communication student who wants to go into international relations and diplomacy and all of that. And I want to just ask, because I also serve as a general secretary in a newly founded human rights organization called Global Rights Alliance. That is what, I'm saying that because you talked about, forming groups and, joining communities that helps to, foster activism. Now, I want to ask, how can we ensure that young leaders, young activists can have sustainable and responsive activism in the local communities they serve? How can we implement the things that, it's one thing to form these groups, but very importantly, how can we be sure that what we're forming, what we're fighting for is actually implemented in the communities that we serve?
Well, first, thank you for speaking up, and thanks for forming this association. That's really important. There's a quote that I hold on to, which is that many of us will plant trees in whose shade we might never sit. like she said, is a marathon, not a sprint. And you're going to have to start with a power map of your community. Who are the power brokers in that community? Is it the local government chairman? Is it the appointed leader? Is it the traditional ruler? Is it the faith leader? What are some mechanisms to reach those power brokers? And what resources, time, talent, and treasure can you draw on to influence them? But have that theory of change and have that power map, and then determine a strategy. If you don't, then you make a lot of noise, have a lot of activity that results in limited impact. But realize that it's going to take time. And that oftentimes, what we're doing today will yield fruit 2 years, 5 years, or even 10 years from now. But don't give up. There are people around to help you succeed.
Thank you.
Full kudos to you, and thank you for the leadership you're providing. I just want to say, look, it is a chess game. Think of it as a chess game. There are many pieces on that board to move, and you never really can predict exactly what the cause and effect relationship with. You don't know when the butterfly, the shifting air from the wing of a butterfly converts into the tornado. But one thing I think matters, and you can hear it in our conversation, every time you find yourself describing your powerlessness, have the discipline of describing your power. Every time you undermine your confidence by buying into what you do not have, what you're not able to do, what makes you afraid, practice saying what gives you courage, what power you do have to exercise. Because much of those voices inside our heads have been planted by others. They're not authentic. It's not authentic for us, short of being tortured, imprisoned and starved, to speak only of our powerlessness. Let's authentically own that we always have room to manoeuvre, however small. And I'm back with the flea.
All right, I'm very conscious of time, so we're going to keep it to those who have lined up. I hope we can get through all of you, but again, just try and keep your questions as short so we can get through everybody as quick as possible. We'll head over this side.
Hello, thank you very much for this conference today. It was really, really hopeful. My name is Anam Naz Nawaz. I've actually quit my 12-year career in the energy sector to shift to politics, so I'm coming back to studies, political research. My question is what do you do when you have a layered identity? I am originally from Pakistan. I grew up in Syria. Today I'm French. I have battled with Islamophobia, racism, discrimination. And when you're part of these movements, there are some people, by luck of where they're born, get off the hook much more easily than you do. And this is a constant fear that I live with, but I don't let it hit me down, but it's there with me all the time. So do you have any advice for people like me?
I'm going to also take the question on this side just to keep it in time. So we'll maybe place Kate if you want to take that question, and then this question we'll place Ndidi.
Hi, good evening. I'm Nathaniel. We're delegates from Rice University, and we're doing a workshop here, negotiation. And but I'm originally from the Philippines, and doing my undergrad in the Philippines, I was continuously an activist, for indigenous people in the Philippines. But I think most youth in all other countries, including the Philippines, are struggling with continuity. Basically, when they are in school, like us, we are very active. We can easily say whatever we want. But after graduating, you tend to be lost on other things, like you need to focus on your career, job security, and it's so easy to forget the cause. Especially for me, that I am currently studying in Houston, Texas, 8,000 miles away from home. It's so hard to be, to continue keeping up with the struggles and causes of your, country, when there's also a lot happening in the country that you're currently residing into. So I think my question is just, how do we make sure that activism can continue even after academia or school?
So maybe Kate, if you want to respond to our question here, and then indeed you can come back to the continuity after graduation.
I think I'm almost utterly the wrong person to answer the question. I'm part of the class of problem makers for you rather than sharing the same experience. I want to honour that. What I do know is that that discrimination is wrong. That discrimination has been outlawed over and over again by the international community. That discrimination is today politicised as a distraction to turn many people away from the true causes of oppression. And every moment you defy that, you represent our hope and our future and our way forward. Your very genetic pool is a reminder to us all of that it's our common humanity that we have to stand up for. Not our gender, not our nationality, not our faith in the first instance. Our primary state is humaninity, not femininity or masculinity or nationality. It's humaninity. And it's for that, in all the struggle and you coming back to further empower yourself, full credit to you. Again, I would just reiterate, nourish yourself. Don't just press yourself into struggle. Look after yourself. Arm yourself with knowledge and with skill and with defiance. Know what fuels you and take care of your mental and physical well-being. You are an instrument to be refined and looked after, not just a method of changing those things that have hurt you so wrongly and unfairly and unjustly.
Excellent. Just to add, and I think it's for both of you, is when I was your age, someone told me you need 3 people in your life. You need a critic, you need a mentor, and you need a role model. Every young person needs a critic, a mentor, and a role model. And I have had the same critic, I call her an accountability partner. She was at MIT when I was at Harvard, till today. We pray together, we hold each other accountable, and she knew my dreams when I was 24, right? She knew what I stood for, and she held up that mirror to me. So find that person in your life. Appoint them to be that person who holds you accountable to live out the values that you've defined today. That role model who's done it and who continues to inspire you, and that mentor who can guide you as you walk through your journey. Because the decisions you take early in life and the anchor that you decide you're going to hinge your tree of life on will determine the trajectory that you can live by. My faith has been my anchor, and I encourage you to dig deep and figure out what your anchor is.
Thank you. Now, I'm very sorry, but we are actually over time already, so we won't be able to take these last 2 questions. I'm very sorry, but I do want to remind everybody that we are going into another session. Before I tell you about that, can we please give a big round of applause to Kate Gilmore and Ndidi, please?